Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 151 based on novel. So let's start. The powerful momentum oppression is like a huge mountain over the void that Xiao Yang stands at the moment. Not far from Xiao Yang, Zhuolin's body stands impressively and his fighting spirit surges. The momentum of two-star fighting emperor doesn't spare any effort to press down on Xiao Yang. Looking at the ferocious look on his face, it seems that he is going to swallow Xiao Yangsheng. Under the powerful momentum of the latter, even though Xiao Yang did his best at the moment, he still had more heart than strength. Before the current battle began, Xiao Yang had been defeated. On the other side of the void, the narwhal snake twisted its body crazily, opened its mouth, made bursts of harsh roars, and tried its best to rush at Zhuolin. If it could, narwhal snake would not hesitate to swallow Zhuolin alive. But unfortunately, no matter how hard it struggled, it was still futile. Even Zhuolin's eyes when he looked at it showed a hint of sneer. When the people present looked intently, they found that a thick layer of energy cuticle was spreading rapidly at an extremely fast speed on the body of the narwhal snake. Wherever it was covered by the stratum corneum, it was like being watered with copper water and couldn't move. Therefore, the narwhal snake's side struggled for a long time without fruit, and Zhuolin could return it with sneer. Xiao Yang, who also saw this scene, suddenly sank in his heart, but he didn't expect that the positive energy cuticle would spread so fast. According to this speed, I believe that it won't be long before the narwhal snake will be completely covered by the energy cuticle. At that time, even if it doesn't want to, it can only enter a deep sleep, and what Xiao Yang has to face, it will also be two strong fighters. With this in mind, Xiao Yang felt dignified, but he didn't need to think about it. The terrible momentum came one after another above his head. At this time, I'm still in the mood to care about this beast. You'd better consider yourself first. The tone of voice was a sneer. Then, Zhuolin's palm opened and closed, and a short sword immediately appeared in his hand. The soles of his feet stepped on the void. The power of terror made the invisible void surge. At the same time, Zhuolin's body also burst out, but in the blink of an eye, it had come over Xiao Yang's head. Holding the short sword in his palm, Zhuolin's face was fierce. In his eyes, the cold killing intention surged out, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing a row of mori white teeth and a chilly cold light. Xiao Yang, die. The voice of extremely cold words spit out ruthlessly from Zhuolin's mouth. With the look in his eyes becoming more and more dark, the short sword lingering in his hand also falls hard on Xiao Yang's head. Ding! Then the next moment, when Zhuolin's short sword was about to fall on Xiao Yang's head, suddenly, a huge black ruler blocked Xiao Yang's head. At the same time, it also blocked the fatal blow. Nevertheless, Xiao Yang's figure was quite embarrassed and flew back for dozens of steps. Finally, with the help of the weight of Shenchong ruler, he held the backward figure. On the opposite side, where he had previously stood, Zhuolin's figure stood impressively. Instead of being angry, he showed a touch of ridicule. Trapped animals are still fighting. I want to see how many times you can block again. When Zhuolin's sneer fell, his figure disappeared again, leaving only an illusory shadow. At the same time, the expression on Xiao Yang's face also changed abruptly. Holding a huge ruler's palm, he made a sudden effort. When his body moved, he hurried to one side. Suddenly, a cold sneer came from Xiao Yang's ear, and at the same time, a sharp blade with cold light was stabbing at Xiao Yang's vest. Ding! At the next moment, with the sound of a crisp collision between gold and iron, Xiao Yang's body rushed forward and flew out, while Zhuolin changed his face slightly, turned his body quickly, and quickly avoided the huge ruler. When Xiao Yang stabilized his body again, Zhuolin moved forward, just facing Xiao Yang head-on again. Hurry to the next moment. Hiss! A huge fighting light group suddenly passed Zhuolin's face in front of him. It was only a moment away that it would bombard Zhuolin. After a flash, Zhuolin gradually calmed down like a sculpture. When he returned to his mind, he also found that his clothes were soaked in cold sweat. What he didn't know was that even his face looked extremely pale at the moment. Although most of the narwhal snake's body can't move at all, don't forget that it can't start in person. It can also use fighting chi to help Xiao Yang resolve the crisis. But unfortunately, the final result is much worse than it expected. Otherwise, just relying on the blow just now will be enough to make him lose all his combat power. The strike of the 4-star fighting emperor is not fun. With Zhuolin's strength alone, it's like facing the semi-emperor strong. He slowly breathed out a breath full of fear. Then the next moment, Zhuolin suddenly turned around, and the color of fear in his eyes disappeared in an instant. Instead, it was as cold as Joyo Yellow Spring. Zhuobentang, kill the beast. The extremely low voice of words came out of Zhuolin's mouth word by word. While saying this, the people present could even feel that the void standing by everyone was trembling slightly. It is not difficult to imagine how huge the fluctuation in Zhuolin's heart is at this moment. When Zhuobentang heard Zhuolin's words, the expression on his old face also suddenly solidified. Until now, his young master is really angry. Yes. Although he knew that he was not the opponent of Narwhal Snake, he also knew that if he offended Zhuolin, he would not come to a good end. Even, the degree of misery might be more miserable than dying in the hands of Narwhal Snake. On the contrary, he felt that he could really have a chance to face it with all his strength. Immediately, Zhuobentang moved and quickly came to the Narwhal Snake. At this moment, the thick layer of energy cutin has covered most of the Narwhal Snake's body. At this moment, the Narwhal Snake can only move part of the area below the head. At the same time, on Xiao Yang's side, Zhuolin once again focused his eyes on Xiao Yang. The look in his eyes was more and more cold. The corners of his mouth evoked a cruel smile, and the whole face looked distorted. Die. When Zhuolin's body moved, Zhuolin's body immediately disappeared into the void. Xiao Yang's face changed again. At the same time, he didn't dare to neglect it. His body moved quickly and flashed everywhere. The dark heavy ruler in his hand also waved along with it, which could block some incoming attacks. However, Oreo was so. In a short moment, Xiao Yang was also hurt a lot. Although he avoided the key points, the sharp pain from the contact between the wound and the air also twisted Xiao Yang's face. In this regard, Zhuolin smiled ferociously and thought about it. In the air around him, golden short swords with cold light condensed quickly. With Zhuolin's thought, they turned into golden lights and stabbed Xiao Yang from different directions. Ding ding. The sound of steel collision sounded one after another. Most of the sword light was resisted by Xiao Yang with a mysterious heavy ruler, but there were still many. They forcibly broke the corresponding defense. However, in a short moment, many thumb-sized holes were left on Xiao Yang's body, deep into the bone marrow and painful to the soul. But even so, Xiao Yang at this time can only bite his teeth and bear the pain. The remaining light from the corner of his eyes turns to the place where the Narwhal Snake stands, but he sees that the latter has been wrapped in the energy cuticle at this time. Although unwilling, I have to admit that the Narwhal Snake at present is like fish on the chopping board. Despite its thick skin, it can only be slaughtered. At this time, Zhuobentang is coldly displaying a set of powerful fighting skills, trying to break the energy cuticle on the surface of the Narwhal Snake, and wants to kill it completely. Seeing this scene, the muscles on Xiao Yang's face couldn't help twitching violently. Although Zhuobentang's bombardment fell on the energy cuticle like a stone sinking into the sea, if it was consumed endlessly like this, the positive energy cuticle would be broken sooner or later, and whether the Narwhal Snake died or not was just a matter of time. Damn it! Immediately, Xiao Yang was furious, but even so, he couldn't change his weak body wandering on the edge of life and death. If you are like this, how can you talk about saving people? Ha ha. Xiao Yang, why, at this time, you still care about the life and death of this beast? Don't you pay attention to me? You're really looking for death. Zhuolin shouted angrily, and then his body moved. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Xiao Yang. As soon as his wrist turned, the short sword in his hand circled in the palm, and his backhand cut away at Xiao Yang's throat. The sudden change surprised Xiao Yang. Although he finally turned his body in time and avoided the key points, he was also left a shallow blood mark on his neck by the short sword. The blood overflowed, and a cold feeling immediately rushed up from the bottom of Xiao Yang's heart, even behind him. The breath between the nose was slightly stagnant. Xiao Yang carefully stroked the injured place with his hand. For a while, the pain came. Xiao Yang's heart stopped at this moment. The muscles on his face couldn't help shaking violently, as if his soul had been touched. And immediately after a flash, Xiao Yang's heart was strangely calmed down. Don't worry, I promised you that I would take you away from here. Since I said it, I will do it, no matter what. He whispered in his heart. Xiao Yang's originally rapid breathing calmed down at this moment. Even his white face seemed to recover. Why, do you want to make the last fight? Come on, let's decide the outcome. I'm going to let these guys see with their own eyes today. Xiao Yang of the scenic spot and the whole western region will die in my hands today. Zhuolin gave a cold hiss, with a sarcastic look on his face. Then, with a wave of Zhuolin's big hand, the golden fighting spirit gushed out of the palm, like flowing water, quickly changed and condensed, and finally turned into a long golden sword. Golden Cloud Sword. It's the Golden Cloud Sword. Tut tut, this is the famous weapon of Child Shui. It is said that he was with Child Shui long ago. It is said that as long as Child Shui offered this sword, he will never lose. It seems that Child Shui is going to use this sword to continue the myth this time. While Zhuo Lin took out the sword, there was a commotion among the crowd outside the window. Obviously, the name of the so-called Golden Cloud Sword is also very famous in the western regions. Xiao Yang, it's worth you to die under my Golden Cloud Sword today. My Golden Cloud Sword has always only killed the strong above the Do Emperor. It's your honor to die under the Golden Cloud Sword, you half-emperor. Zhuo Lin listened to the admiration from the crowd outside. At the same time, the golden sword in his hand also pointed to Xiao Yang. At the same time, the magnificent fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body poured out without money at this moment. After winding along Zhuo Lin's body for a while, he imitated Buddha's hovering arms like water snakes, and finally, all of them disappeared into the golden cloud sword held by Zhuo Lin. With the pouring of fighting spirit, the light on Jinyun's sword is very prosperous, and a powerful and domineering breath also spreads from it. Anyone who is aware of this breath can't help but become dignified on his face. The Golden Cloud Sword is really extraordinary. It can become the first weapon of the four families. The eldest son of the Zhuo family. Its power is really not comparable to that of ordinary weapons. Compared with Zhuo Lin's sharp edge, Xiao Yang's behavior is disgusting and strange. Just when everyone thought Xiao Yang was ready to show his last move, the next scene stunned everyone present. Xiao Yang not only didn't use the Xian heavy ruler, but took it away with his backhand. Then, in Zhuo Lin's unhappy eyes, he spread his hands. Then, the light in the palm flashed, and several jade bottles appeared in Xiao Yang's hands. Bang! With a slight shock, Xiao Yang shattered all the jade bottles in his hand. Then he revealed dozens of pills. Suddenly, the strong smell of medicine quickly spread over the square, leading to a change in the faces of all the people present. Is this third-order pill? These are all third-order pills. Even if he is a third-order herbalist, he can take out so many third-order pills at one time. I'm afraid even the Herbalist Alliance doesn't necessarily have that skill. At this moment, all the people present were surprised. Everyone's eyes fell on the pills in the hands of Xiaoyan and Xiaoyan. So many third-order pills, if taken out, would attract countless strong fighters. Now, just put them in front of them and say they don't move. Naturally, it's false. But they also know Xiao Yang's ability. Since he dares to take out so many pills in full view of the public, he naturally has a way to protect it. However, in everyone's fiery eyes, Xiao Yang took a big bite. At the same time, he raised his hand fiercely and put the pill in his hand into his mouth. Looking at that appearance, it seems that he can't wait to put his hand into it. This sudden scene made everyone's body shape freeze in an instant, just like a statue. He watched Xiao Yang lift his second hand, and then another big mouthful filled with a large handful of pills. On such a big square, dozens of strong fighters stared at Xiao Yang, who was trying to swallow a large mouthful of pills. In addition to extreme shock, the mood in his heart was crazy. Such a move is crazy. Even they dare not try. Dozens of third-order pills were swallowed by Xiao Yang at one time. The powerful power brought by that was enough to completely explode Xiao Yang's body. Xiao Yang's move was nothing different from suicide. This guy knows he has no way to live, so he plans to fight with his life. It's crazy enough. Alas. It's just a pity that such a good cultivation talent is young. Who can you offend? It's just that you want to offend the four main schools. It's really a young frivolous man. I don't know the greatness of heaven and earth. In the crowd, the words of surprise and regret spread quietly. When everyone looked at Xiao Yang at this time, their eyes showed a look of pity. Looking at the whole western region, there are many strong fighting emperors, even though they are everywhere. However, even they dare not directly oppose the four major families, but Xiao Yang is good in front of us. His strength is only 6-star and half-emperor. He is still active in the western region under the four major families' search. Although he escaped from the four major families with good luck several times before, but this time, no matter what, he won't have the slightest way to live. This madman. Seeing Xiao Yang swallow dozens of third-order pills in one gulp, at this time, even with Zhuo Lin's mind, he couldn't help scolding, and the look on his face changed. At the same time, the golden cloud sword in his hand was immediately retracted, and the fighting spirit in his body poured out of his body, and quickly condensed a golden fighting spirit mask around his body. The power of dozens of third-order pills is enough to turn Xiao Yang into a super-large human flesh bomb. Once it explodes at that time, not only Xiao Yang will die, but when the terrible power completely sweeps out, even the strong fighting emperor present may not be able to resist. Even if he is as confident as Zhuolin, he doesn't dare to be careless. While Zhuolin dodged back, the crowd outside also raised their fighting spirit. Naturally, they can see the imminent danger on the field. For the sake of their own lives, these people dare not have the slightest carelessness. While everyone on the court was doing something, dozens of pills were refined in Xiao Yang's body at the same time. Suddenly, the terrible medicine surged up in Xiao Yang's body like a volcanic eruption. The powerful and domineering power is like a group of runaway wild horses. Xiao Yang's limbs and bones are swept rapidly. At this moment, Xiaoyan's cells all over her body seem to be very hungry. At the moment of the power of those pills, she is crazy to absorb them. However, in just a few breaths, the breath in Xiao Yang's body has returned to its peak. However, the outcome is far more than that. Although the breath in Xiao Yang's body has recovered to its peak, the medicine consumed is only half of the dozens of pills that have been completely integrated. The rest of the power is to rush into every cell of Xiao Yang's body uncontrollably. At the moment, Xiao Yang is like a bucket full of water. However, although the bucket is full, the huge water flow is still frantically injected. But in the twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang's skin all over became hot, and his color became blood red. The whole person looked like a blood man, quite terrible. Of course, this is just Xiao Yang's appearance. At the moment, in his body, it is even more chaotic. The terrible energy condensed by dozens of third-order pills shuttles frantically in Xiao Yang's body, making him constantly feel intense pain. Damn it! I was careless. Unexpectedly, the power of the third-order pill was even more terrible than I expected. The mind tried its best to control the energy of the riot in the body. Xiao Yang couldn't help but scold. Then, Xiao Yang bit his teeth hard, and suddenly gave a low roar in his heart. His hands were clenched fiercely. The terrible force made the surrounding void a slight agitation. At the same time, Xiao Yang's mind moved. In his heart, the remaining soul forces poured in without reservation, madly invaded his body, and forcibly gathered the scattered violent energy together again. Of course, this kind of measure can only play a temporary role. As long as Xiao Yang can't consume the energy in his body, these forces will spread again sooner or later. At that time, once the condensed forces erupt, the forces erupted at that moment are enough to tear Xiao Yang apart in an instant. Xiao Yang doesn't want to kill himself like this, so, drink. After temporarily gathering the violent energy in his body, Xiao Yang took a big breath. For a long time, several violent flames with different colors were ejected from Xiao Yang's mouth and then suspended in the void in front of Xiao Yang. At the moment, standing in front of Xiao Yang is the top 6 different fires in the list of different fires. However, there is less net lotus demon fire and nothingness swallowing fire. Therefore, Xiao Yang replaces it with 2 other different fires. Sacrifice different fires. Next, what Xiao Yang needs to do is to condense all the 6 different fires, condense the strongest fighting skill created by Xiao Yang and destroy the fire lotus. When he thought of doing it, Xiao Yang did not hesitate at the moment when he sacrificed the 6 different fires. 2 palms, which were very fat because of excessive energy, clapped heavily in front of him, and immediately slapped the 6 different fires together. At the same time, the violent power also collided in an instant. Thorn la la. The fire burst out, and the violent power invaded in an instant. Xiao Yang's 2 palms were immediately replaced by scarlet wounds. They were dripping with blood. It just looked painful. The corners of his mouth couldn't help but grin. While Xiao Yang was only pumping air conditioning in his mouth, he didn't dare to hesitate in his hand. In the center of his eyebrows, the only remaining soul force rushed out of his body crazily, and tried his best to control the gorgeous fire mass with slight explosion in his hand all the time. Drops of scarlet water fell quickly from Xiao Yang's forehead, but I don't know whether it's sweat or blood. The pain is extremely serious, but at the cost of blood, the flames in Xiao Yang's hands also fuse rapidly with the naked eye. In a short moment, the flames in Xiao Yang's hands have reached a balance point, and there is a great tendency to fuse. While Xiao Yang made these moves, the people outside also stared at Xiao Yang's actions in the field with different eyes. In a short time, the powerful fighting emperors who were shocked because Xiao Yang swallowed dozens of third-order pills at one time were immediately shocked by Xiao Yang again. This guy is dying. He can do anything. He's not really crazy. Unexpectedly, I still want to forcibly integrate different fires together. This. How is this possible? Madman. This guy is a madman. If you want to die, you die yourself. I don't want to die with you. During the meal, all kinds of voices in the crowd came out, including shock and fear. The fury of different fire is recognized by the whole continent. The fury of different fire is doomed that it cannot coexist and integrate with anything in the world. At the moment, Xiao Yang's move is undoubtedly to challenge things that the whole continent can't confirm. How can it not make them feel shocked and frightened? Damn it. What the hell does this boy want? After seeing this scene, Zhuo Lin's expression in his eyes also changed. He was in awe of the strange fire and did not dare to make his mind. After all, now everyone in the whole continent knows that the strange fire in the world has turned into spirit, which can't be provoked. How dare he make his mind on the strange fire? But even so, Xiao Yang's behavior at the moment, but it still made him feel a burst of fear. Poof. At the same time, in the void in front of Xiao Yang, suddenly, just listen to a puff, unexpectedly, another forest white flame suddenly rises, and this forest white flame is undoubtedly the bone spirit cold fire. Seeing this sudden scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Even the strange fire that was forcibly condensing in his hand was written about some eruptions, and the fire burst out. Xiao Yang's palms were wrapped by scarlet blood, which looked particularly terrible. Add this. Although I have said I won't do it for you, if I just lend you strange fire, it shouldn't be done for you. Jiu smiled and said. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang was slightly stunned. He silently thanked him, and then he stopped talking. He knew that it was not a joke at the moment. Even if these 6 different fires could deal with the ordinary strong fighting emperors, those 3-star fighting emperors were not ordinary people. With Xiao Yang's current strength, with these 6 different fires, there is no half assurance that he can kill them. If there is bone spirit cold fire, Xiao Yang has at least half assurance that he can fight with those 3 stars by destroying Fire Lotus. I believe that even if he can't kill them, he can make them pay a great price. Pa. The 2 hands clapped heavily. Between Xiao Yang's palms, the gorgeous flame and Sen white strange fire clapped together. Suddenly, more violent forces erupted from the 2 flames, and even the surrounding void was of violent agitation. At the same time, Zhuo Lin opposite him, with a pair of sword-like eyes, also stared at the 2 flames between Xiao Yang's hands, and felt the terrible destructive breath from them. Unconsciously, the look in his eyes gradually became fierce. From Xiao Yang's previous seemingly crazy behavior, until now, Zhuo Lin has almost been able to determine that this practice is definitely not the first time for Xiao Yang. In that case, if Xiao Yang completely integrates the 2 flames in his hand, at that time, after the fusion of 7 different fires, what level of terror will the power erupt? With this in mind, Zhuo Lin immediately tightened his mind and realized that Xiao Yang swallowed dozens of pills. He didn't intend to die with them, but to catch all the people present with his card. But from the moment, in order to condense into this fighting skill as soon as possible, Xiao Yang seems to have to concentrate and focus all his energy on the 2 flames in his hand. Since you have no time to be distracted, I'll see how you can form this fighting skill. If you can't do it, you'll have to die. With a grimace in his mouth, Zhuo Lin took back his palm and held it slowly. The Jinyun sword, which had been included in the ring, also appeared quietly in Zhuo Lin's hand again at this moment. Shua. Then the next moment, when everyone in the audience focused on Xiao Yang, Zhuo Lin's body disappeared abruptly on the void just set up. At the same time, a sharp air-breaking sound also sounded abruptly over the square. Then at the next moment, in the void not far from Xiao Yang, a cold light suddenly flickered, followed by an extremely fierce golden long sword. It's Jinyun sword. The invisible sword Qi pierced the invisible void in an instant. Immediately after that, Zhuo Lin's body also appeared in the void. Then the next moment, his body came to Xiao Yang's face. He saw that the golden cloud sword in his hand was about to pierce Xiao Yang's eyebrows. Until this moment, the people on the field noticed the sudden appearance of Zhuo Lin. But when the people were thinking back, Xiao Yang, who was originally concentrating on integrating the different fire in his hand, suddenly raised his head, and a pair of scarlet eyes stared at Zhuo Lin in front of him. The invisible hegemonic momentum shocked the latter's mind in an instant, and the whole person was stunned. He lost his mind for a moment, but when Zhuo Lin immediately returned to his mind, Xiao Yang in front of him had suddenly retreated. When he saw the cold smile on Xiao Yang's red face, the look in Zhuo Lin's eyes was a condensation, a bad premonition, and frantically rushed to his heart. No. At the moment Zhuo Lin regained his consciousness, the golden cloud sword in his hand suddenly waved and his body suddenly retreated. At the same time, Xiao Yang raised his hand slowly. On the square, Dozens of powerful fighting emperors looked together. At this moment, over Xiao Yang's raised palm, a gorgeous and beautiful fire lotus, the size of a washbasin, was slowly standing. Xiao Yang's back-flying body stopped slowly. At the same time, his expression gradually became fierce on his red face. A pair of scarlet eyes stared at Zhuelin, whose face changed greatly. Immediately, he opened his mouth and said, "Destroy the fire lotus, go." The gorgeous fire lotus floats away to Zhuelin leisurely on the void. The gorgeous fire lotus is like a perfect work of art, which gives people a feeling of fondling it. But when people present concentrate on it, they will immediately find that when the gorgeous fire lotus crosses the void, a trace of powerful momentum and pressure with great destructive breath is emanating from it. Wherever the fire lotus passes, the invisible void is quietly torn open, leaving an endless void painted black on the void. On this fire lotus, even those who fight the emperor and are strong in the presence also feel a deep sense of fear in their hearts. They have no doubt that if the fire lotus falls on any one of them, the result will be undoubtedly killed in an instant. Such a powerful force, no one present can bear it. What level of fighting skill is this? What a terrible power. No wonder even the patriarch of the 4 major sects can't stand him. Even the strong fighting emperor can't stand it alone. In the crowd, the eyes filled with fear stared at the gorgeous fire lotus flying slowly in the field. At the same time, everyone was almost crazy to mobilize their fighting spirit, and tried their best to gather around their body, which was considered to be their strongest defense, in order to resist the coming threat. In the field, Zhuelin's face was also very dignified at the moment, staring at the terrible fire lotus coming face to face. The sense of fear in his heart was no worse than those ordinary strong fighting emperors outside the field. He never thought that Xiao Yang would condense the 2 flames in such a fast time. Moreover, from the results, the power of this gorgeous fire lotus at the moment is enough to threaten his life. This is what Zhuelin really cares about. Damn it! How could this boy have such powerful fighting skills? I knew it. I should have killed him before. Let him have no chance to show it. He scolded with hatred in his heart, but then Zhuelin had to reluctantly shake his head. No matter what he thought in his heart, it was too late. No matter how much he thought, it was useless. Instead of useless complaints, he might as well find a way to face the current situation. Wani Fire Lotus really broke out. He was unwilling to be the first ghost under the knife. The gorgeous Fire Lotus is like a leaf, floating forward slowly in the empty void, and Zhuelin opposite it finally has an action at this moment. Shua. The Jinyun sword in his hand was suddenly shocked, and the sword chi rippled. There was a light sound of the sword in the void. Then Zhuelin's mind moved, and the fighting spirit in his body poured out crazily again, spread all the way along his arm, and finally poured into the Jinyun sword. The golden light on the golden cloud sword is very prosperous. With the injection of fighting spirit, a strong and extremely terrible smell also emanates. After finishing these, Zhuelin seemed to be not at ease. He frowned slightly. Then, his teeth bit the tip of his tongue. Suddenly, while Zhuelin's face became pale, a few drops of golden blood also flew out of Zhuelin's mouth. Under Zhuelin's control, it flashed into the golden cloud sword in his hand. These drops of golden blood are the few essence blood in Zhuelin's body. With the addition of these drops of blood essence, in an instant, the more dazzling golden light burst out on the golden cloud sword, which was already full of essence. It looked like a golden sun from a distance, which made people can't bear to look straight at it. However, when Zhuelin finished these things, the imagined scene did not appear in the eyes of everyone on the court. On the contrary, Zhuelin held the golden cloud sword and stood it in front of him. Under the golden light, he buried his whole person together into the golden light. Seeing the gorgeous fire lotus coming in front of him, Zhuelin calmed down. On the contrary, all the people outside the field retreated towards the edge of the square with fear. Who? Zhuelin slowly breathed out a breath. At the same time, his heart moved. Then, in his body, a surge of sword meaning swept in all directions immediately. The field of sword. With a golden aperture spreading at Zhuelin's feet, the void where Xiao Yang and he was filled and buried by Zhuelin's sword field. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang on the opposite side frowned slightly, shook his head ruthlessly, and forcibly pressed down the dizzy feeling from his mind. At the same time, the strange fire in his body is also madly refining the endless violent fighting spirit. After several rounds of fighting, Xiao Yang's soul power has been exhausted. Just now, in order to quickly condense the destruction of Fire Lotus, Xiao Yang has exhausted all his soul power. At the moment, Xiao Yang has broken off contact with it while destroying Fire Lotus. Otherwise, he would have detonated the destruction of Fire Lotus by himself. Xiao Yan is also curious about Zhuo Lin's move. He can be sure that with the power of destroying Fire Lotus, there is absolutely no strong fighter who can forcibly fight against it. Zhuo Lin should understand this. But in that case, what does Zhuo Lin mean? With such a curious attitude, Xiao Yang will not be the only one on the court, but the distance between destroying Hualien and Zhuo Lin is only a few tens of feet. No matter what they want to do, it will be too late in the end. Zhuo Lin, who sacrificed the field of sword, looked at the sword with a sharp look, and the sword intention in his eyes was condensed, which made his eyes with good deterrent look more penetrating. Whenever people look at him, it seems that there is a sword finger in the center of their eyebrows, which makes people shudder. Yu Jianju, 6th move, sword seal, fall. With Zhuo Lin's indifferent cheers falling, the golden cloud sword in his hand also fell at this moment and stabbed heavily on the void in front of him. Boom. Then, in front of Zhuo Lin and above the sky, the invisible void collapsed. Then, a huge golden sword like a small mountain fell in the air. Then, it was firmly fixed on the void in front of Zhuo Lin. Oh, is this the Imperial Sword Formula or the 6th Sword Seal? If you remember it well, Jianming used it when he first came to the western regions. It can be called one of his famous fighting skills. Unexpectedly, Zhuo Lin can also use it. Seeing the slightly familiar giant sword in front of him, Xiao Yang couldn't help showing a look of surprise on his face. He was also surprised at Zhuo Lin's terrible cultivation talent. Yu Jianju can become a famous fighting skill of Jianming, and its power will not be much worse. Unexpectedly, Zhuo Lin can cultivate to this level at a young age, which also shows the horror of his cultivation talent. I'm afraid there are only a few people who can compare with the whole Tianjian Gate, or the 4 major gate. At the thought of this, Xiao Yang felt a surge of pressure. According to his understanding, the first person of the younger generation in Tianjian sect is not the Zhuo family, nor any of the 4 families, but the son of Jianming, the leader of Tianjian sect. It is said that the latter is young and has reached the strength of 4-star fighting emperor. This kind of cultivation talent is really called terror. Today alone, the strength of the latter can reach 4-star. It is conceivable that after it really grows up, its strength will be higher. There are such peerless figures in Tianjian Gate. I can't imagine that the other 3 sects will not lack such talented figures, and these people are Xiao Yang's strong enemies in the future. While Xiao Yang was thinking like this, Zhuo Lin on the void waved his long sword again. Drink. There was another low cry. Then, the empty space in the sky collapsed again. As before, another golden giant sword with no less prestige fell heavily in front of the first giant sword. The 2 giant swords formed 2 sword shields to protect Zhuo Lin behind. 4 huge swords fell one after another, all of which were blocked in front of Zhuo Lin layer by layer in the form of sword shield. At the moment when the 4th sword and shield fell, the gorgeous Fire Lotus also collided with it at this moment. At this moment, the world was silent and the whole audience was silent. All the people present were holding their breath. Even Zhuo Lin, who felt it personally at the moment, was also dignified. Buzzing, buzzing. A buzzing sound came from the place where the gorgeous Fire Lotus met the sword shield. At the same time, the huge sword shield trembled violently at this moment. On the contrary, the brilliant Fire Lotus has not been weakened at all, and even the rotation speed has not changed at all. Each rotation will release a breath of terrible destruction, and the powerful force will spread wantonly to form a huge wave of energy, which is like a flood and beast, pounding on the sword shield. Each bombardment would make the sword shield tremble violently. At the same time, on it, cracks about the thickness of the thumb spread rapidly. After a few breaths, under the eyes of all the strong fighters on the court, the first sword and shield burst, and the Fire Lotus continued to fly forward slowly without reducing its power. Then, it collided with the second sword and shield again. Buzzing, buzzing. The familiar scene came again. All the strong fighters on the field were frightened by the power of the Fire Lotus. In the face of the sword shield, I'm afraid even the strong fighters in the field could not easily break it. However, at the moment, in front of the Fire Lotus, the sword shield seemed so unbearable. Such a scene, but it can't be said that the sword shield is too weak, but Xiao Yang's destructive Fire Lotus, which is really terrible. Although the second sword shield lasted a lot longer than the first sword shield, it was still broken by the Fire Lotus. Until this time, the gorgeous light on the Fire Lotus gradually faded. At the same time, the Fire Lotus also stagnated in the void, rotated slowly, and no longer moved. The appearance of this scene made many people present feel a sigh of relief. Unexpectedly, at this critical moment, Hualien actually stagnated in the void, which surprised the people present. But then, at the moment when the corners of the mouths of all the strong fighters on the court just showed a smile, the lotus petals on the outermost layer on the gorgeous fire lotus quietly fell off at this moment. This scene seemed unobtrusive, but at the moment when the lotus petals fell, a terrible smell of destruction swept across the square like a storm in an instant. Boom! Terrible energy storms came one after another, but in an instant, it smashed the oncoming sword and shield. Pooh! Zhuolin was the first to bear the brunt. Under the terrible energy storm, almost instantly, his face became white. A big mouthful of blood mixed with visceral fragments could not help but gush out of his mouth. Zhuolin's body flew backward uncontrollably. But before the first wave of energy storm dispersed, the lotus petals on the second floor fell, and the more terrible energy storm swept across the huge square again like a hurricane. In just a few breaths, dozens of strong men on the field can still stand, but there are less than 20 left. The rest are either dead or seriously injured. Under this energy storm, even if they are as strong as Dudi, they can't change the fate of death. Buzzing, buzzing. In the twinkling of an eye, the third wave of energy storm swept away again, and all the people left on the field turned extremely white in an instant. Even the 3-star fighting Emperor strongman like Bai Yingzhua Bentang turned extremely ugly on his face at the moment. As for Zhuolin at this time, under those 2 storms, he was naturally injured, but with his own means, he also insisted on it. After being bombarded by 2 waves of energy storms, Zhuolin's body was constantly blown away. When he landed again, his eyes turned, but it happened to fall beside Sun Shuo. At this time, after 2 waves of energy storms, the breath in the latter's body was extremely weak. Seeing this, Zhuolin immediately raised a grim smile on the corners of his mouth. Before the third wave of energy storm, Zhuolin endured the sharp pain from his body and pulled Sun Shuo, who was seriously injured, to the front of him nearby and blocked the latter's body in front of him, in order to withstand the upcoming energy storm. At the same time, in the pile of corpses in that direction, a figure covered with blood also climbed out of the pile of corpses. Looking at its appearance, it was Hua Ba, the leader of the Hua family on this ruins trip. Although Hua Ba temporarily lost his fighting power in the previous battle, which made him unable to mobilize the fighting spirit in his body, at the critical moment, with some of his own means, he also struggled to carry the waves of energy storms. Nevertheless, Hua Ba was extremely weak at this time. At this time, he even struggled to climb his body, let alone get up and mobilize the fighting spirit in the body. However, when he had just climbed out of the corpse, turned over hard, and breathed the bloody air in his mouth, he heard only a hoarse roar coming from afar, followed by heavy footsteps. When he returned to his mind, Zhuolin did come to him, raised his sword and didn't wait for Hua Ba to return to his mind. The 3-star fighting emperor has been separated from the head. After killing Hua Ba, Zhuolin's crazy body suddenly softened and fell heavily to the ground. On his side, Jin Yun's sword also fell at will without control. Unfortunately, the sharp tip of the sword pointed directly at Zhuolin's throat. Bang! At a certain moment, on the square where I thought there were no living people on the field, another figure struggled to get up, and a pair of dark old eyes full of fear looked at Zhuolin's position at the moment. Struggling with the pain in his body, the old man forcibly mobilized the few remaining strands of fighting spirit in the cyclone. The soles of his feet stepped heavily on the ground, and his figure flickered for several times. Finally, he came to Zhuolin. The weak Zhuolin hardly opened his eyes, revealing only a thin gap between his eyes. In the blur, he also saw that this man was the leader of his Zhua family, Zhua Bentang. Hua Ba didn't die, and Zhua Bentang wouldn't die so easily. In front of Zhuolin, Zhua Bentang looked at the latter with a dignified face and full of worry. Zhuolin is the most powerful genius in his Zhua family's cultivation talent. He doesn't want the latter to make any mistakes. Otherwise, let alone his father and the patriarch of the Zhua family, he can't pass. Therefore, he doesn't dare to neglect Zhuolin, who is seriously injured in front of him. Young lord, don't worry, my subordinates will never let anything happen to you. After whispering, Zhua Bentang frowned and took back his eyes. Then he quickly took out a jade bottle from the ring and quickly opened it. A round pill rolled out of it. Suddenly, the strong smell of medicine spread rapidly in the void of Shenju, even the thick blood smell in the space. They were washed a lot at this moment. This pill is a third-order pill. It was specially prepared by Zhua Bentang for this relic trip. The purpose is just in case. I thought this trip to the ruins would be foolproof, but what he didn't expect was that he actually used this pill in the end. When Zhua Bentang thought about this, he couldn't help thinking of Xiao Yang's last destructive fire lotus. The power of that thing is really terrible. Even now, when Zhua Bentang looks back, there is endless fear in his heart. It's really hard to imagine that such a powerful force will be released by a strong half-emperor. It's really terrible. He can't even imagine that if Xiao Yang's strength is a little stronger, it will reach the level of 8-star and half-emperor, or even 9-star and half-emperor, and then show the Fire Lotus. In this way, how terrible will the power of Fire Lotus be? I'm afraid even those 3 stars fighting against the Emperor will not have any possibility of survival. After feeding the pill into Zhuo Lin's mouth, Zhuo Bentang took back his mind. A pair of old eyes moved slowly, but finally fell on the golden cloud sword at his feet. Alas! With a deep sigh, Zhuo Bentang grabbed the handle of Jinyun's sword, and a pair of dark old eyes looked at the Jinyun's sword in front of him carefully. At the same time, Zhuo Lin in front of him, in the latter's body at the moment, the pill just swallowed also diffused a warm medicine, quickly repairing the injury in Zhuo Lin's body. When Zhuo Bentang focused on the golden cloud sword in his hand, he never saw it. At the moment, Zhuo Lin was narrowing his eyes and staring at Zhuo Bentang in front of him. In the depths of his eyes, there was a dark killing intention passing quietly. A few minutes later, Zhuo Bentang put down the golden cloud sword in his hand. His body moved and sat beside Zhuo Lin, who was lying flat at the moment. After taking a pill, he also began to meditate and recover from the injury in his body. At the same time, in the place where neither of them noticed, on the square, the statue standing in the center of the square stood quietly among the palms held up at the moment. However, judging from his face at the moment, he seemed to be no better than Zhuo Bentang. A pair of dark eyes stared at Zhuo Lin and Zhuo Bentang, who survived on the square at the moment, but a dignified color could not help passing on their pale face. Unexpectedly, there is no one in the Zhuo family. In this way, he can't take risks and rush to fight. If he faces Zhuo Bentang alone, it's all right. Since there is one more Zhuo Lin, he has to be careful in everything. A 2-star fighter is strong enough to reverse the changes of the whole war situation at a critical time. Even now Zhuo Lin is not lightly injured, but he is not just like this. With this in mind, Bai Ying frowned and looked at the 2 people on the field. Then he took back his eyes, immediately sat down, operated the internal skills and began to recover his internal injuries. Bai Ying didn't take any pills with him when he entered the ruins. Those things had been handed over to by Zhon long before he entered the ruins. This time, his father and son went into the ruins one by one. Bai Ying, as a strong 3-star fighting emperor, naturally had no doubt about his strength. He didn't think anyone could really hurt him during this trip to the ruins. Of course, the current situation made him lose his count. As for Bai Zhon, their father and son have already agreed that Bai Zhon will not enter the depths of the ruins. In order to get some treasures in the ancient forest, Bai Zhon is bound to take a lot of risks. For the sake of insurance, Bai Ying handed over all the pills to Bai Zhon, so that Bai Ying has no pills to take at the moment. Hiss. However, at a certain moment, Bai Ying in the process of meditation suddenly heard a long sword piercing the body, but when he hurried to look in the direction of the sound, he saw a scene that surprised her. At this moment, Zhuo Lin was lying on the ground, but he didn't know when he stood in front of Zhuo Bentang. At this moment, Zhuo Lin was holding the golden cloud sword in his hand and pierced Zhuo Bentang's chest with it. Bai Ying was stunned by the appearance of this scene. He never thought that Zhuo Lin, as a fellow, would kill Zhuo Bentang. You know, Zhuo Bentang saved his life just now. Unexpectedly, it was only a short time before he was killed by the latter with a sword. Zhuo Bentang can be called a pity, let alone Bai Ying. I'm afraid even he didn't think that the person he wholeheartedly wanted to protect would eventually become the one who killed him. 4. Why? Before he died, Zhuo Bentang's white face showed an unbelievable expression. A pair of dark old eyes stared at Zhuo Lin in front of him, and his tone was full of grief and despair. I never need a reason to kill. The tone was indifferent. Zhuo Lin withdrew his eyes coldly. At the same time, the golden cloud sword in his hand was also pulled back fiercely. Suddenly, after a burst of uncontrollable convulsions, Zhuo Bentang's body softened and fell to the ground. At the same time, the color of life in his eyes dissipated rapidly. So far, the only 2 3-star fighting emperors left in the field are also reduced by 1 again. On the statue, Bai Ying saw this scene and couldn't help sneering in his heart. He wanted to show up and fight, but then his body was in place again. Zhuo Lin's indifference is totally beyond his imagination. Although his strength is only 2-star fighting emperor at the moment, Bai Ying doesn't dare to rush out with that mind. Zhuo Lin can lay such a heavy hand on his own family, not to mention the threat to him, an outsider. Under the pressure of momentum, Zhuo Lin will only burst out more terrible forces, which is not what he wants to see. For the sake of insurance, everything must be considered in the long run, not only for himself, but also for the family behind him. While all this happened in the ruins, on the other side, outside a cold snow mountain, at this moment, several figures are slowly standing. Even the narwhal snake that disappeared on the square also appeared here. The cold wind is bleak between heaven and earth, snowflakes are flying, and the thick snow under your feet is like mud. Each foot will make a deep pit appear in the snow. At this time, Xiao Yang stands here, and the 3 eagles stand here beside Xiao Yang. In front of these 4 people, above the cold wind blowing void, a glacier beauty is standing steadily with a pretty face and indifference. A pair of long and narrow beautiful eyes stare at Xiao Yang in front of him. The meaning of ice cold in his eyes is very strong. Even the cold wind between heaven and earth is incomparable. Standing on the snow, the cold air between heaven and earth seemed to suppress the insurgency energy in Xiao Yang's body, so that Xiao Yang's face was a little better at the moment. However, when he looked at the peerless beauty in front of him, he couldn't help being surprised in his black eyes. Xiao Yang could not imagine that it was this man who helped him at the critical moment and left the ruins with Xiao Yang. Of course, the people with such thoughts in their hearts are naturally not only Xiao Yang, but also the 3 Tianying people not far away from him. They are also surprised to look at the beauty in front of them. In the face of the latter, they dare not show the slightest profanity in their eyes, but are abnormally careless and respectful as in the past. It's a woman who can be treated respectfully by the 3 king beasts in the Shaolin Mountains. Naturally, there's no need to say more about her identity. This woman is the overlord of the Shaolin Mountains, the real king of the Shaolin Mountains, and a super strong person whose strength has reached the source territory. Cold Frost. This video will end here.